And we're recording. Good afternoon. This is Patricia Frederick from Warmly Nourished and the community group, The Whole You, Warmly Nourished. And I'm here with a good friend, Jessica Lee. And Jessica and I met 5 years ago through another mutual friend named Kat Millar, through one of her workshops. And we just hit it off, and then I started following all of your news articles in Wellbeing magazine and kept sending you reviews of the magazine articles. And then last year, towards the end of last year, I participated in a course that Jess was running online, and it was helping to kind of complete things and get over some overwhelm and work through and get projects finished, which I am happy to say was very successful, and really learned a lot in that. So it was a fantastic course. Jess is, she writes about neuro and well-being, writer and educator, and is very passionate about sharing and facilitating the world of the brain and how we can use neuroscience-based strategies to find solutions, which is very exciting. Build resilience, which helps us lower stress and increase health and happiness. And she has a very informative website, thesparkeffect.com, so it's easy to find and lots of information on that website. She's also been featured in several publications, Body and Soul, Curves, and the Wellbeing family of magazines, which is the Wellbeing Core magazine plus Breathe. Which was nice to see your articles in Breathe as well, because every time I pick up a new version of their magazine, you're in there. Like, yay! So it's very exciting. So that's, and Jess and I decided to have a conversation today about habits and something that I term goals for the soul. So instead of goals for the business that you work for, these are your goals. These are goals for you to live your best life. And that's what we've decided to discuss today. So I'm very happy to introduce Jess. And Jess, welcome.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. Always wonderful to chat with you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Now, you've had your own journey to health and well-being, and it wasn't straightforward. You had some twists and turns. Want to walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was doing my honours degree at university, so, straight out of high school through to university, after I did honours, I was quite sick and I just couldn't understand what was going on. And I ended up being diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. And that then began a 7-year journey of recovery. So it certainly wasn't quick, but getting sick was actually a really pivotal moment. And it's one of those things I look back on and actually am really grateful for, because it actually made me sort of re-question everything, because I was very much that type A personality and probably still am really, but that sort of concept of pushing hard and burning the candle at both ends and just all of that sort of stuff around a good work ethic was how I'd been living my life. And so when I got sick, I sort of went, this is probably not the way to live. And that's what got me fascinated by the body, the brain, because I asked myself, what do we need to thrive? And how can we have success in our life that's actually sustainable? Because I could see that what I was doing wasn't working. So I, from my bed when I was sick, I started to read all of this stuff around health and wellness and psychology and mindset and the connection between stress and energy and all of these sorts of things. And I started to write from my bed, and that's how I actually started writing for some of these health and wellness magazines in the very small
time. That makes sense now.
Yeah. Now, look, these articles would take me a whole year to write. They now take me, I don't know, a week or two. So it just puts it in context about how small those little steps were for me. But so it's been a very interesting journey around appreciating health, rethinking things, resilience, all of those things. Yeah.
And did food play much of a part in your recovery?
It's a really interesting question, because one of the first things that I was told to do was an incredibly exclusionary diet. So with no sugars, including fruit, no gluten, no caffeine, no dairy. So it didn't leave a lot of options. And when you're exhausted trying to actually, I would love to have had you, Pat, to help me. And this was 7 years ago when gluten-free products didn't really exist.
No.
So I didn't notice any significant change. And what it did was actually create an interesting mindset around exclusion around foods, because it wasn't a great experience for me. But so for me now, coming back, with hindsight and knowing what I know now, I actually see food as a really important tool for health, not necessarily exclusion necessarily, and particularly not extreme exclusion that I was going through. But really tapping into what's good for your body, and also bringing joy back into food rather than seeing it as having to restrict or exclude or that sort of, so that's been I'm still on that path.
Because it can create an unhealthy relationship with food if it's too restrictive. And I know when I was personal chefing back when I started the business in 2010, I had a lot of clients who were facing all sorts of health challenges. Many of them they hadn't really been named yet. And the gluten-free situation was very tricky to navigate. There was only one or two companies in Australia that were really helping make that happen. One was Rowe's Cakes, and one was another company that had a small little factory in Hornsby making flours and different things. But you had to do a lot of research to find them.
It's
not
really
tricky
today.
No, today it's easy. It's in the local shops, but it used to be very, very tricky. And I remember navigating that scene and doing all the research. And that's how I found health coaching, was doing research for clients. So that led me down a different track.
And I think probably like you, the research with the neuroscience and wellbeing has also helped me understand the connection between food and mood, food and energy, food and inflammation, which is something I'm quite interested in as well, and looking at the Mediterranean diet and the research around that. So it's there's a lot more out there now, not just products, but knowledge and research, which is really exciting.
That's great. And it's interesting that you mentioned inflammation. I was listening to something this morning about inflammation. It's like when your body has so much inflammation in it, and this is the chronic inflammation, that it finds the weakest point in your structure of your body. So that could either be your joints, it could be your heart, it could be your lungs, and it can be any part of the body that there's a true weakness. So it will affect, inflammation will affect people differently.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which is curious, which is an interesting little fact. So the way food affects mood differently, can also, inflammation will affect different parts of the body depending on where the weaknesses are. So resilience is really important.
Yes.
So we're going to be talking about habits and how they get formed and how they can be changed. Can they be changed? I'm gonna venture down the road of saying yes. And how do you help people identify, well, no, that's not the way you live your life. That happens to be a habit that you have, and maybe the habit needs to be changed, and let's make some changes. So would you like to walk us through how are they formed? How are habits formed? Do we have some insight into how do they come about?
I'm going to keep it like fairly simple, because I think that's what we sort of all need. But predominantly our habits form in two ways, and sort of in a combination of those two. The first being reward, and the second being repetition. So when we do something and it feels good, our brain's reward system is activated, and we get dopamine, which is that feel-good hormone that we get, and it wires our brain to go, that feels good, let's do it again. And so we're actually internally motivated to repeat that action. So it's not hard to sort of imagine, if you like chocolate, you have chocolate, it tastes good, and you think, oh, I want more. And so that, on a very basic level, is how, reward creates that motivation to repeat. And when we repeat any thought or action, it creates a stronger neural pathway in our brain. And as those pathways get stronger, it becomes more of an automatic process. So if you think about brushing your teeth, You know, over the years, when you're little, you get taught, you know, brush your teeth morning and night, and you do it over and over. And in the end, it's something that you do effortlessly, sort of a bit mindless to it. And habits are really important in the sense that they allow our brain to be more efficient. If we had to every morning start from scratch
Oh,
with
so
every single
so they sort of allow us to go on autopilot.
yeah, it's that sense of autopilot, which is why what you said before is sometimes it can be a tiny bit tricky to even acknowledge if something's a habit, because you might be just doing it mindlessly, like it just happens. It's your first response. So I think simply understanding that if something's rewarding and we're repeating it, it will become a habit. And so, of course, there's going to be habits that are really helpful, and there's going to be habits that actually might be holding us back. And in that as well, we've also got this concept of there being a cue or a trigger for the kicking off of the habit formation. So you might, you know, at 7 a.m., you might, you know, press your coffee machine, and that's the beginning of your habit. And that clock at 7 is what sparks that trigger. In the same way that if you're stressed, you might instantly reach for chocolate biscuits, and that becomes the way that you wire your brain. So we almost create these associations that there's a cue or a trigger, and this is what we do. And if we do it over and over, it just becomes a habit or a routine. So that's a very simple way of understanding.
Yep.
I talk with my hands.
That's okay. I have the same. I do the same thing. So I have to sit on my hands.
Yeah, I probably should too. That habits are formed.
Okay. And are they hard to change once they've been formed?
Look, I think that really depends what it is. You know, say creating a habit around drinking more water would be a lot easier than disentangling a habit that is sparked when you feel stressed and overwhelmed or fear or anxiety. So the whole concept of being able to create habits in 30 days, all those sorts of things that people talk about, it's not entirely true, because it depends what you're trying to change and how deep-seated it is. Because we have to understand that every habit we have is actually serving a purpose on some level. Because there is that level of reward, we have to acknowledge that even the habits that aren't helping us, they are solving some problem in the moment. And so actually having to do a bit of mindset work sometimes to deconstruct what's going on there is how we move forward. So, yeah.
And I would imagine, though, that sometimes we don't even know we've got the habit until someone points it out to us. And that can be like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think that's true.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, sometimes people point things out to me as like, oh, didn't even realize that. That's interesting. And then when you become aware of it, I think awareness also helps you to sort of unravel or to view it with a more curious mind of, is that a habit I want to keep? Is that a habit I want to change?
Yeah, look, I think self-awareness is such a huge key to any type of forward movement in life, because we can't change what we don't acknowledge, and we can't acknowledge something we're not aware of. And that's where having those moments in your day of mindfulness, or where we journal, or where we talk it out with people, just where we're trying to get a little bit of distance from our own experience, can be what's really helpful to get that bit of awareness and acknowledge, every time I, feel this or do this, this is what's going on. And sometimes it's about working backwards, is actually saying, okay, I reached for chocolate when I know I don't really want to do that. Let's backtrack. What was I thinking? What was I feeling? What triggered it? And this is where starting to learn our patterns is very, very powerful. So if you realize, as you start to bring awareness into how you're living from day to day, that each time, this happens or this thought gets activated, you reach for sugar, or you have coffee, or you have some emotional reaction or something that you would prefer to be different, you actually then can start to unravel it and go back to the root cause and actually deal with it there.
Okay. So that's being really open and curious and honest, and I'm going to say brave. Being brave to open that up and being raw to yourself, to go back and have a serious look at it. Right. And once we start to do that, and we start going down that path of evaluating and saying, well, this is where it looks like it may have come from. How do I change the habit now? How would I go about making a change?
Yeah, so I guess
And
that's
can I,
about,
yeah.
sorry, keep going. Yep.
No, is that about rewiring my thoughts, or um, how would I go about changing a habit when I've recognized that it's probably not the best for me?
Yeah, so we're looking at, you're probably still going to have the same cues and triggers, but you want to create a different type of reward, right? So um, that's where I think sometimes, like I'm a really big fan of actually making sure that things are enjoyable. So if we use the example of, say, like eating chocolate as an example, you often hear people say, well, when you want to reach for chocolate, just have a carrot instead. And
that's not going to do it, is it? a thing of chocolate or a carrot.
And that's the thing, right, is that, look, there could be some people out there where that could work for them, but we can't take a reward away and not replace it with another reward that is going to make us feel good, that is going to activate that dopamine and is going to inspire us to want to do it again. And so, you know, that could be like, that's where we have to tap into our own personality around what do we need to do that is going to still be rewarding. You know, do you need to, like, you know, Pat, this is your sort of expertise too, but do I need to look at different snack options that taste amazing, like as good as chocolate, but don't carry, you know, all the calories and the sugar and the issues that are going to come from that, you know, because there's tons of food out there. You just have to be open to actually thinking what they could be. And then saying, okay, well, when I need a break, I'm not going to sit down with the chocolate. I'm going to sit down with this snack that I love.
Yeah.
And that is then about repetition, and that creates the new pathway. So when we talk about pathways in the brain, I quite like to use the example of imagining like a letterbox at the front of your house and this overgrown grass. Each time you go to the letterbox, you start to create a pathway through from your house to your letterbox through that overgrown grass. If you stop using that pathway, what happens? All that grass grows back. And if you want to create a new pathway, you then have to start again. Now, the beginning is always the trickiest, isn't it? Because you've got to get through all that grass. And as you keep doing it, the path becomes definable. It becomes easy. It's more effortless. And so that's a really good way of also understanding how neural pathways work. Is that they get stronger the more we use them, and they also weaken when we don't. So the research suggests we don't ever truly sort of get rid of habits that we've wired in. We need to just shift the focus to something else. And that's why it's so important to make sure there is a reward and enjoyment factor involved, or else we probably won't repeat it and we won't be able to lay that pathway down.
Okay. All right. And is it fair to say that it's be patient with yourself, and if you aren't achieving that change to the goal quickly, just take those steps and keep progressing forward?
Definitely.
It just will come with time. It's not a quick process.
Yeah, look, again, depends what you're trying to achieve and what habits you're trying to create. But being patient and kind with ourselves, I think, is very important. And when we can understand we're literally rewiring our brain, I think that helps us take some of the pressure off ourselves. But there's a really interesting concept when we look at habit formation around mini habits, which I think is so, so powerful. So what happens often we go, right, I want to create a new health and wellness habit. I'm going to, you know, to exercise for 20 minutes every day, which sounds fantastic. And that's a great goal to have. Yeah. But if it's a goal that you can't do every day, whether you're super busy, not feeling great, or whatever life throws at us, then you probably won't do it every day, and we don't get that habit formation. So there's this concept of mini habits where what you do is strip it right back to the first step that you can take that you could do every day. So an example would be, this is one I use in my life, is that my goal is to do 20 minutes workout at home, but I start with one song on my playlists and I get my hand weights and I only have to commit to one song. And that's super powerful. That's my mini habit. What happens, as we know, getting started is often the hardest part. Once we get into it and we get started, we get momentum, and you'll often end up, like I do, 3 or 4 songs later, you get to your 20 minutes, but your objective wasn't to do the 20, it was to do the one song. And on days when you think, oh, I just couldn't be bothered, you think, I can do one song. It's like 3 minutes. And so this is how we actually create sustainable long-term changes through these mini habits. And once they become automated, we can pick something else. We don't want to take on too many changes all at once because we end up feeling overwhelmed. So mini habits, very powerful.
Oh, I love that concept. Mini
Very
habits.
good.
Ooh, I've got a few of those, but I like that. I like that idea of a mini habit. That sounds like a bite-sized thing I can go with.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
So don't build it up and create such a high wall for yourself. Create a shorter, something you can step over quite easily, and reward yourself, saying pat on the back. You've done your one song, fantastic.
Yeah.
And tomorrow maybe this playlist will keep playing, and you're still working at it.
Yeah,
that's great. Yeah.
And it's a reframe, because I think when we look at creating behavioral change, is that when we struggle to do it, we can often get really critical on ourselves and put a lot of pressure on ourselves, which demotivates us to keep going. And so when you say, look, I'm actually going to put the bar here and not here, is that you're pretty much always going to jump over it. And so you get, again, this dopamine of I did it. You get that reward center activated just from achieving the very thing you said you'd do. Then everything else is a bonus beyond that. Every track that you dance to and work out to is a bonus, rather than looking at, oh, I wanted to do 3 songs and I only did 1. Totally different mindset and totally different energy. One makes us feel like we're failing, and one makes us think, oh my gosh, I am doing this and I am making progress. I'm turning up every day to create these changes.
Oh, totally beautiful. Different. And do you think that helps feed our resilience?
Yeah, definitely, because resilience is 2 things for me. It's about starting where we are, using what we have and doing what we can, which is a quote from Arthur Ashe, right? So it's about focusing what we can do. So on those days when you are tired, instead of just saying, I can't do anything, it's like, well, what can I do? And if you've established these mini habits where it's about, I just need to move for 3 minutes and I'm done, that's a pretty small thing most of us would be able to do. But it's also, resilience comes from seeing our ability to actually create change and to stick to things and to achieve things. We get confidence when we take action.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if we can have these small actions, we're going to build our confidence, and we're going to really be reflecting back to ourselves our potential. And that's important.
Yeah. Oh, it's very important. And taking resilience just a little step further, building resilience or keeping the resilient bank topped up, is you're topping up good lifestyle habits, and really rounding out your lifestyle so that it's supporting what your body needs and what you need, also for your mental view of yourself, making sure that you've got those happy thoughts for yourself. And that helps keep you strong and healthy when something like coronavirus comes along, and it won't wipe you off your feet and send you reeling. It will maybe you catch it and you get the flu and you wind up going to bed and resting, and rebuilding. But because you've built that resilience, and you've got all of that in the bank, it's not going to completely knock you off your feet for 3 weeks. It's only going to put you out of action for a few days or at least a week, which will give you time to rest, recuperate, and move forward.
Yeah, so, definitely.
So your mindset and the messages you say to yourself, your self-talk, movement, exercise, and eating a diet that's rich in antioxidants and all those wonderful foods that build your immune system are going to keep your resilience topped up.
Yeah. And definitely about creating that strong foundation through lifestyle decisions. And I think the beautiful thing about habits, like you say, is that if some of these mini habits are actually laying these good foundations and they become automatic, we don't actually think about them anymore. So when you've developed habits around what you're eating for breakfast, or how you're going to move, or how you're going to take some time out each day and spend journaling or mindfulness, is that just becomes your life. You don't have to struggle against it. And that's what's really exciting, because when we look for quick fixes that can be like I was saying, around like that really intense exclusionary diet, it's not sustainable, too much,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's that lifestyle shifting.
Yeah. Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you for that. That was great. So the key messages I got from that were is to be open-minded and start investigating habits that, or stopping yourself from, if you think you've got a habit that needs to be looked at and examined, and review to see where it's come from, and then to take small steps to kind of rebuild or change that habit, is a very positive way to move forward if you want to make a change to a habit. And maybe that's your 5 cups of coffee a day habit. Maybe it's the nightly come home from work, and maybe it started as a glass of wine and it's ended up being a bottle of wine instead of a glass.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a habit you want to look at. I don't know what your habits are, dear listener, but maybe asking a friend, is there a habit that you see that doesn't look that might need a little bit of a work? I don't know. Maybe it's something you ask a friend to help you with. Anyway, so habits can change, and we can also create mini habits, which mini steps for creating something that isn't so big and scary and overwhelming. Yeah. All right. Well, I think the other area I wanted to look at was goals. And I call them goals for the soul, because these are goals that are for your lifestyle, for you, the things that are going to light you up, and help you build the life that you really want. It's not the goals that you have to meet at the end of the fiscal year with sitting down with your boss and having a review of where you are and where you've come from. And yes, tick in the box, you get your bonus this year. Yay. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the things that light you up, that make you who you are, that you might have forgotten. You might have forgotten some of these wonderful things because you're so busy in your job or pleasing others or running after keeping up with your family, and you've forgotten about yourself. And these goals are what are going to make you shine and be bright in your own life. So I wanted to talk a little bit about goals for your soul. What do you think, Jessica?
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, look, in the work that I do and in the Spark Effect Academy that I run, which is a goal achievement program, is that I teach my community about setting purpose-focused goals, not outcome-focused. And this is like so much what you're saying is about, understanding that goals, it's not really what we achieve necessarily, it's who we become in the process. So goals are such a powerful vehicle for taking us from where we want to be, where we are to where we want to be. And, the sorts of things that we do when we set goals versus when we don't is entirely different. We show up differently in our life. We make different decisions. We connect with people differently. And when we can align those goals with our personality, which is something that I do a lot of work with my clients, which is really exciting. So those people who identify as teachers or guiders or inspirers, is to say, well, what goals, can we align with that personality, with your strengths and with your purpose? Because, I call my business the Spark Effect, because it's about that spark that people get in their eye when they start talking about the things that they love, the things that light them up. Is how do we create goals aligned with that? Or how can we actually take goals we're working on and bring that element into what we're doing? So yeah, it's a very interesting area.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating. So how do you help someone find their purpose so that they can actually work on the goals that will serve their purpose or align with their purpose and bring them up? How do you do that with people?
I guess I work a lot with business people, and so getting clear on what their purpose is in business. So what are they trying to achieve? That's sort of like the area that I work in. But I'm just thinking, if people weren't in business, I think it's I talk about the 5 pillars sort of wellness. And one of those things is about connection. So being connected to what matters to you and what matters to your life, and the bigger things. And I think, again, like we spoke about before, is around self-awareness, is actually noticing how you feel when you do particular things, or just giving yourself a chance to almost to dream a little bit and to connect with what else you would like to do other than just building maybe your career or caring for your family. And that could be going back to what we used to like to doing as we were young.
Yes.
Because what we were doing as little people is often who we are at our essence. Like you talk about nature and nurture. Now that I'm a mum, I think there is a lot of nature, to be honest. I mean, they say 50-50 in the research, which is probably true. But I can see, even with my son, who's nearly 3, that he has his own stuff, and has from the moment he was born. And as we get older, we lose touch with that. We get adult, we get responsible, we get lots of shoulds put on us. And I think that's another thing, is being conscious of how often we're saying, I should do this, rather than what do I actually want. So if we look back at what were we doing when we were young that just felt amazing, and that sense of flow, the flow state, is also really important to connect into, to give us an idea of purpose and passion. Is, the flow state, also known as like getting in the zone, that sense of timelessness when we do something, that sense of effortlessness, that sense of fulfillment. So for some people, it's music related. For others, it's, stuff in nature. For others, it's academic, and that's where understanding, your personality type is really powerful, is realizing that you've probably been that way since you were young, but we've just lost connection. What are your thoughts on that, Pat?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And getting lost in something that all of a sudden you look up and you were enjoying it so much, and you go, oh my goodness, that's the time, or where's the day gone? And yet you've really connected with what that was. And I call that part of your finding your joy.
Yeah.
And that helps define what you're very passionate about.
Yeah.
So for me, I disappear into the kitchen. It's a creative process. Sometimes I'll think to myself, I'm thinking of new spice blends. And all of a sudden I'll go in the kitchen and I'll walk out of there with 6 new spice blends. I don't know why I did that. I just woke up and said, yeah, I need something different in my spice cabinet. And this is what I'm going to do with that today. Or I'll come up with some sauce recipes. I've done that a couple of times. Or I need a new marinade for chicken. I just think like that, and I go in, or I need a new dip, and I just go in and go, what goes with what, and what can I do here? And I'll just create it and come out and go, wow. But that was oh my goodness, the whole day's gone.
Yeah.
And the other thing is also to try something new. So a friend of mine was trying these art nights where you go and have a glass of wine and play with some art. And I'm not a very good artist. I admit that freely. It's not something I consider good. My creative bent is food. And it always has been from a little kid, baking cookies at Christmas time. That's where it started. But I went along to these art classes, and what I found was, no, I'm still not very good with art, but what I really liked was mixing colors. And I really enjoyed the feeling of just playing with color and seeing, oh, if I added a little bit more white, I would get this color and that effect. And it was really encouraging. And I thought, well, maybe there is hope for me in this field. And then the artwork would come out and go, no, no, not at all. I'll stick with my cooking. That's quite all right. And then that works for me. But I link passion to joy and joy to passion. And then that helps me identify goals for the people that I work with in the coaching that I do. And I find that if you link it to joy, the idea of achieving that or working towards that sounds so much more interesting than let's just get some goals down on paper for you. Let's go.
Yeah, and
it sounds much better when you can have a bit of a giggle and say, well, what would you like to do? Would you like to create community? Would you like to start working on your next chapter? Because they say that women will have it's called the second spring. We'll have a second spring where we start creating from within ourselves things that are purely created out of us. And a lot of women are not able to make that connection. And to make that connection would be so fantastic, because that's something to look forward to and not recede from life, but to embrace life and move forward into life.
Yeah. Gosh, so powerful. And also a lot around permission, like giving ourselves permission, because, you know, sometimes we don't do things because we feel like they're not leading anywhere, you know. And even your example of art, you know, it's not about the outcome of that art. It's that beautiful experience of getting lost in something, and, you know, it's very mindful. And it you know, that's often in these moments is when we often have our aha moments, those creative insights. And, you know, so I love that being curious is so wonderful, is not to close off. And as we get older, I think that's even more crucial, because we start to have those habits and routines that have become, you know, how we live our life, that we can sometimes put a stop and say, oh, I don't do that. That's not my thing. And so being a little bit more curious can actually open up new avenues, particularly, if you're not sure. But there's another one that I actually really love, and it's sort of the opposite of joy, that can be really indicative of what we should be following, is actually feelings of jealousy and agitation. So when we watch other people in our lives and we think, oh, like if they just launched a book, you think, oh my gosh,
why haven't I launched that book?
Exactly.
What's wrong with me?
What's wrong with me? All of that
Yeah.
actually negative emotion gives us an insight as to what actually matters deep down. And the beautiful thing about emotion is that it pops through quicker and faster than our logic. And if we can bring an awareness into our emotions and go, oh, I feel a bit of jealousy that they've done that and I didn't, or maybe I think I could do it better than them. You know, all those emotions we don't want to admit we have are indicators of what we should be following, because it's activating something within us. So we can actually use those emotions too to help guide us to our purpose and passion, because chances are if we're feeling those negative feelings, it's probably because we've pushed that desire down over the years, or said, I should do something else, or I don't have permission to do it, or I'm not good enough, or whatever those sorts of thoughts are that often hold us back from following those things.
Yes, I have an outline for an off-the-wall idea for a cookbook. It's been sitting on my computer for 3 years. It's there, and everybody always says to me, why haven't you written a book yet? I just haven't gotten around to it. It's one of those things that I keep parking. And every time somebody puts out a new cookbook, I look at it and go, damn, that's the idea. That's similar to the idea I had. What's wrong with me? Why haven't I moved forward on this?
Yeah. And there will be stuff under there, you know. It's so interesting, the concept of procrastination as well. Like, we assume procrastination is about laziness, not being disciplined enough, not having enough time, but it's often not that at all, actually. There's, you know, researchers talk about procrastination as a mood repairer. So when an emotion or a mood or a thought comes up that's uncomfortable, we procrastinate in order not to feel it. So, you know, if something feels overwhelming, what do? We go and start to rearrange our pantry. You know, if we start to feel a bit of self-doubt and we think, oh, can I do this? We go, oh, I need to go for a walk now. So procrastination, again, is also like often an indicator that there's more going on under the surface, that is often around some level of fear or anxiety, and could be fear of failure or even fear of success. It's not always the same thing. So procrastination is a very interesting one to like delve a little bit deeper into, because the other thing is that the more we care about something, the harder it can be to get started sometimes, because it means so much to us. So that's
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It really does. So would you say that doing things, small steps towards completing that, would be a way forward?
Yeah, so absolutely. It's about breaking down that big task into just the next small step. But also it's about sort of sometimes deconstructing some of our perfectionistic tendencies, or just the level of pressure that we put on ourselves, that this has to be amazing, or this is my life's work, or whatever the thoughts are that just is too much. You know, we've got to dial down the pressure. And obviously the way we do that is taking those small steps. but also giving ourselves permission to evolve, you know, not to demand perfection at the very beginning. Because often that whole concept of like starting with that blank piece of paper, it's like, oh, it's got to be great from the beginning. But that's not how anything is created. Everything is created with those small steps, and they're often messy, crappy. And you know, one of the strategies I share with my community is, and I've shared with you as well, Pat, is there's a Kickstarter method where you set a timer for just 5 minutes and say, right, I'm just going to start for 5 minutes. And much like the mini habits I was talking about, once we get started, we're like, oh, I'm enjoying this. I'm going to do a little bit more. And you could be 2 hours into it and go, oh, okay, you know. So just taking the pressure off ourselves is what allows us to take those next step forward. And also knowing what those steps are. Because if it's just this big book idea in your head, it's no wonder it's tricky to start. It's too big in your head.
Yeah. No, mine's gotten all the way down to defining it and what it's going to look like in terms of its content. I haven't written a word. I've just got an outline in I've actually put the outline on the computer. It's sitting there in a Word document, just sitting there waiting for me to get over myself and get out there and do it.
But the other thing on that as well is around the creative journey. And this is true of, like, not creative as in arty, but anything we're trying to bring forth that didn't exist before, whether it's creating a garden or a book or whatever it might be, is understanding the peaks and troughs of the creative process as well as we move in our goal setting process. Is that at the beginning, when we feel overwhelmed, that can make it really tricky to start. And then as we start, we're like, oh, I'm doing it, it's going well. And then we hit the messy middle bit where we think, I don't know how this is going to come together. And that's often when we stop and we go, oh, it's not a good idea. I can't see it happening, and we give up. But when we push through, we then keep going like, yep, it's getting there. I can see it taking shape. Then we get to the last bit where we start to imagine putting it out into the world. And then of course we get triggered sometimes and think, oh, is it going to be good enough? Can I actually do this? Can I share that part of myself? And again, that's often when people stop. So we see issues with people having trouble starting, getting through the middle bit, and then actually finishing their projects. So often people have lots of half-finished projects that are brilliant, but they haven't been able to overcome that last hurdle.
Yeah. And that's the tricky bit. And that's always the hard stuff.
Yeah.
But I would imagine kind messages to ourselves will help us over those lines. And
yeah, absolutely. Self-compassion is huge.
Yeah, huge, absolutely huge. Are you familiar with the work? I know you're familiar with the work of Louise Hay, but have you ever seen her mirror workbook? The little book she created called Mirror Work, and that's, in case people don't recognize my accent, that's a mirror, a physical mirror that you look at. And the idea is to look at yourself in the eye every morning, and there's a series of 21 affirmations that you say to yourself throughout a 21-day practice, and then you rinse and repeat. And the idea is to build this really great relationship with yourself by looking at yourself in the eye every morning or every afternoon or every evening, whichever you choose. And having an honest and frank affirmation to yourself, and building up on your internal strength of who you are and what you're capable of doing.
Yeah.
Help you succeed and move forward.
Yeah.
It's another goal for the soul.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because our eyes... work. Yeah. So if anyone's not familiar with it, it's a small little book by Louise Hay. I'm a big fan of her work, and sadly she's no longer with us. But she is the creator of Hay House Publications. Some very fine authors are part of her collection there, but including herself, and she did some beautiful work, absolutely beautiful work. Is there anything else you'd like to share about goals or habits before we take our leave?
Oh, look, probably just one more thing around goals, and we like when we look at purpose, focus versus outcome.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, often when we set traditional goals, it's about, okay, I'm gonna, you know, go to the gym 3 times a week, and that's what I'm gonna do. But we obviously set goals within like the messiness of our lives, don't we? Where things happen, and like, gosh, everything with COVID-19 is such an amazing example of how quickly everything can change overnight. And for a long time, I didn't set goals because I could very rarely reach them in the way that I'd planned, mostly because I was still recovering from health issues. But we all have stuff, right? And so when we can actually get clearer on what the real purpose is for why we wanted to do that goal. So understanding it's not actually the gym that we're trying to achieve, going to the gym. It's about building strength and wellness into our body. When we face those setbacks, we can be more resilient because we go back to our purpose. So if you can't get to the gym, they're closed, or you've gotten sick, you've got a flu or something, instead of having to give up on your goals, is you go back to purpose and say, what was this goal about and how can I re-navigate? So if you got a flu and you can't go to the gym, you could say, well, okay, it's about strength and wellness. So what I need to do is actually get better sleep. I need to cook some really healthy meals. Once I'm up and recovered, I can go back to the gym. And so helping us to sort of ride out the peaks and troughs of life so we can keep working towards our goal, and sometimes, being able to shift with it, I think is really important, because often when something goes wrong, we go, well, I can't do it in the way I thought, I've got to just give it up. But when we understand the purpose behind it, we can actually keep tracking towards that goal always.
Okay.
It's always something we can do.
That's really good, because in a coaching world with the health coaching side, everybody thinks the only thing that health coaches do is help you lose weight, and that's not everything that we do. That's a happy outcome for someone who's looking for that as an outcome, but that's not the only thing that we do. We help build your resilience and help you identify purposeful things that are meaningful in your life and the purpose behind it, so that the goals that you are creating for yourself are linked to that purpose. And so just setting a goal is never quite, we won't let you off the hook with that. We sort of keep asking the question, why? Why? And that's to help strip back to its real base, to the base purpose behind that goal.
Yeah. Which is so crucial for motivation, and also to then re-navigate as sometimes life happens. So
exactly.
Because
sometimes you have to stop and pivot.
Absolutely, pretty much always. That's what I've found anyway.
That's right. And you've built in enough resilience to be able to do that, because your purpose hasn't changed. Yep. How you achieve that purpose may change.
Exactly.
But the purpose itself hasn't changed. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you. So Jessica, how can everybody find you?
Yeah, so if you come over to thesparkeffect.com.au, and that's effect with an E, on my homepage, I've got a few free guides that might be useful. One is about choosing a goal to work on and how you can actually make that decision. I've got another one on how to beat overwhelm, and you can also take a look at my 8-week goal achievement program, the Spark Effect Academy. And
you've got a new program starting in September, don't you?
Yeah, September the 7th is kicking off, so you can have a look at that and pre-register for that as well. And I have a blog. You can read some of my articles if anything I've said today you think, oh, that's interesting. You can explore a bit further, and you can always contact me. I've got all my details there too.
Yeah, that's right. And if you ever come across her article, she's in the Wellbeing suite of magazines, which is the Wellbeing flagship magazine. You've had several articles in there, as well as one of the newer ones called Breathe. If anybody's come across that magazine, there's some great articles in there, and Jess is one of those contributing authors. So very great. And you also do, you're also a keynote speaker.
Yeah, so I've done some work with some bigger corporations. So I've worked with CommBank and Blackmores and National Australia Bank as well, teaching all of this stuff.
Fantastic. Well, Jess, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And yes, everybody, you know who I am, but just in case we missed it, I run a small little business called Warmly Nourished, which is all about nourishing you body and soul. And I've created a community page called The Whole You, Warmly Nourished. And the idea is to sort of nourish your journey towards yourself and your better health. Okay. Thank you very, very much for joining me today. And Jess, as always, it's a pleasure to see you.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.